Hi guys, Peter Finch here and welcome down to the next episode of the Ripped Apart series.
Hold your gun, caught the wire, aim for desire. Hold your gun, caught the wire, aim for desire. Hold your gun, caught the wire, aim for desire. Hold your gun, caught the wire, aim for desire.
If you are new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button, make sure you hit that like button as well, and comment below on everything that you see in today's video. And today we've got two drivers. Now I've chosen these two drivers because I've used them before, but because they illustrate a point that I'm going to be looking at in today's video. Now I've got the M2 driver from TaylorMade. Now this is the original M2, where they actually brought in the multi-material construction with that carbon crown. And then we had the next generation of the M1, where they brought in more carbon into the sole, and it's also about a movable weight system on the bottom of the club. Now the other reason that I've chosen these is because this is all about center of gravity and how that actually affects ball flight. Now the first thing, companies are often bringing out drivers like this now. So in the series they're bringing out a non-adjustable sole, which is really simple, designed to get the MOI quite high, get the center of gravity further back in the club head, and they're also bringing out a more adjustable model. Now in the M1 series you had the T-track system, in the M3 you've now got that Y-track system, but it does pretty much the same thing, but it is adjustable. Now the reason that the brands do this is because this is a nice simple version. This is generally aimed at a higher handicap, although with this specific M2 this actually worked for very good players as well. But for the M1, the whole point of this is that when you got fitted for a driver, you could adjust this T-track system and actually alter center of gravity and alter spin characteristic. Now when we're talking about center of gravity, it's actually important to start with another TaylorMade driver, the SLDR. Now the SLDR, a fair few years ago now, 4 years ago now, was the driver that really started to push center of gravity forward and started to make quite a lot of noises about it. That's because when you have a look at a driver, the further down and forward the center of gravity can go, the higher the launch will be, but the lower the spin will be. But more importantly, the lower moment of inertia that you will have. Now, moment of inertia, very simply put, is the club's resistance to twisting around the axis points. Now, with a low center back CG, you have more resistance to twisting. You also get more backspin, which is why companies started to introduce this further forward CG position to control the amount of spin that you could actually put on the driver and therefore get higher launch and lower spinning shots. But that's where the trade-off comes in, because it's going to be higher launch and it's going to be lower spinning with that further forward CG, but it's going to be less forgiving, which is why the SLDR was a very good driver for people who could hit the middle of the club. Out the heel and the toe, oh my word, prepare yourself to lose some golf balls. So they started to make adaptations and now we are further down that line. But that is what we're going to be looking at. We're going to be looking at this weight system as we start ripping this driver apart. And we're also going to be looking at the normal CG driver as well, with a fixed CG position, which you can see is designated by the screw weight at the bottom of the club. And then we're also going to be having a look at this multi-material and discuss how in the future this is going to be much more common in the drivers that we're going to be seeing released. Right, let's get ripping these apart. So the M2 and the M1 driver. Now you can see here there's a distinct difference between how the weights operate on the bottom of these clubs. So we've got this T-track system here on the M1. You've got the front rail, which basically will give you a fade or a draw bias depending on if you're shifting a little bit more to the toe or to the heel. And then you've got this back rail. The further you move it back, the further that pushes the CG back in the head. That's going to give you that little bit more forgiveness, that higher MOI. You can see here I've pushed it a little bit more forward in the club because I want to reduce the amount of backspin that I was having with my drives. In the M2, you can see that the weight screw is firmly positioned in the back of the club because this is all about pushing that weight a little bit further back, giving you a little bit of a higher MOI. You've also got this speed pocket, which is pretty much in most of the TaylorMade drivers now. It's called a hammerhead, I think, technology now, but it's basically the same thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove these weights and I'm going to start ripping it apart. Okay, let's have a little bit of a closer look at these two drivers. Now, I'm quite surprised at a few of the things that I found taking this apart, and I'll just talk you through them as we go. The first thing that surprised me, but it really shouldn't have surprised me, is just how light the carbon fiber crown is. It is ridiculous. Now, the whole point of adding in the carbon fiber is that it has the strength to withstand the amount of morph that the driver has when struck. Obviously, most of that force is absorbed still by the titanium face. However, having that carbon on top, it just allows that redistribution of weight so easily, and I just didn't quite figure out how light the carbon would be. It's absolutely ridiculous, and just how heavy that the weight would be. Now, with the M2 construction, it's pretty much as you see it. The actual little golden weight at the back and the screw, complete weight of those on their own is 2 grams. So it's only 2 grams as you actually take those out. Now, the weights that were going in the M1, they are much heavier. So the weight, the little track, and the little screw, that actually adds up to 13 grams. However, one of the other weights is actually a little bit lighter, and that adds up to 12 grams, which is interesting. I'm not sure if that's meant to be, I can't remember which one was in the back and which one was in the front rail, but there is a very slight difference in those two weights. Now, the next thing to notice is just how much more complex that the M1 is inside the head compared to the M2. So obviously you've got the sliding rail, which is actually embedded into the sole a little bit, and that has to be obviously because it's movable weights. You're not going to have a massive weight track system sticking out the bottom too much, so that's movable about. These fins here, now these are for actual stability, but they're also to manage acoustics. So when I went to TaylorMade last year now, they were talking about how these fins, yes, they structurally help, but they help direct sound and vibrations in a way that actually make a more pleasing sound. And when they're banging on about geoacoustic technology like they did in the M1, the M2, the new ones when they came out, that was all about repositioning these fins. So I found that quite interesting to see them actually in action. Now, the only other thing to talk about with these drivers is the adjustable shaft and the adjustable neck that goes into them. So you can adjust the loft, you can adjust the lie as well with this. And that is something which, in conjunction with the M1, with the movable weight system, that's what makes it a really good club for fitting, and what makes the M4 and the M3 good for fitting as well. As with most of the other drivers, as mentioned, coming out, they seem to have this similar format of a simpler driver versus a more complex driver to help the fitters. If you think about the Mizuno drivers that have come out, I think one of the Mizunos has something like ridiculous, like 1400 settings that you could possibly have. So this is quite clear the way the manufacturers are going to be going with their drivers. And guys, what do you think? I mean, what do you think about everything that you've seen here? Is this something that you expected when I actually opened up these drivers? I'd love to know your feedback. So please comment below, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Make sure you like the video and share it around. Follow me on my other social media platforms as well. And yeah, let me know what you think. Very interesting.